Alrighty guys, so this video is called Handling Life's Disappointments. So I've had a number of things that I've observed lately where people have had pipes break. I know I've had water leaking through it's not too fun, but I've had water leaking on one of the floors here. And then also outside with the gutter, I have some issue that I have to get resolved, and I've been working on that. It's been ongoing actually. But aside from these things, I know one student had a situation with his plumbing. Another person had her house burned down. I know other people that have had other situations. And I just think, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a video blog on, or not a video blog, just a video on handling life's disappointments. And that can also mean many things like having unmet expectations. So if you accept that things are just the way they are in terms of something happens and there's a result, then it gives you a little bit of a leeway, a little bit of freedom in terms of how do I want to perceive what's happening. And, whether you have a tragedy, illness, a death in the family, something happens and you just couldn't believe that it happened. All these things happen from time to time. Brian Tracy actually says in one of his video clips, and it's interesting because I assisted him at 2 events, as I mentioned before, through seminars on DVD, just as a volunteer. He says that every 3 to 4 months you'll notice something going wrong in some area, some sort of challenge. And I know for me, I had something happen where I was wanting to sell my house, didn't put it on the market, and the neighbor was interested, so I had her take a tour. Then she says, well, she wasn't going to buy it because she was going to move to be with her family, a little bit out west. And so I said, okay, it makes sense. And I was going to set it up to where she could do, owner financing with me, to make it very attractive. And then my neighbors, just last week, they put their house on the market. And within 5 days, 12 people looked at it, and she actually put an offer down. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I said, well, I'd worked with her like 6 to 8 months ago. I thought that she was going to do it. And she told me, and I said, it's kind of interesting because you said you were going to move and that you weren't wanting to buy. And, I thought I was giving her a great deal and everything. She took a tour, but it wasn't like she was totally sold on the house. It just was above her price range and what she was willing to pay, perhaps. But this house was exactly what she wanted. It had windows on the side, apparently. It was very clean. And they didn't have, as many dogs or anything as I did. And so it's kind of, for her situation, it worked perfectly. But I was disappointed, and I let her know that because I had expectations that if she was going to buy, it was going to be my place. Okay? And then I was kind of thinking, well, it was interesting because I was talking to her about this, and another neighbor was there, and she said, well, Sanjay, how many times do you change your mind? You change your mind a lot, don't you? So other people can change their mind. And I said, yeah. And that's what she told me. The person that offered, the neighbor that ended up putting the offer down for that house, she says, I changed my mind. And it worked for her. It didn't matter if I created an attractive deal for her or not. So it goes back to this idea of dropping expectations. That things happen in life. I mean, some can be small like this, and others can be more major, right? And it's just it's an event in your life that you're processing. And if you think about what Martin Seligman said about optimism and pessimism, it really helps that, okay, optimists view situations as temporary, external, and localized to the situation. Pessimists view situations as permanent, pervasive, and enduring, essentially, and internally, controlled. So it's kind of tied into me, and it's pervasive, and I have this ruminating thought pattern, let's say, about a situation. So basically, at the end of the day, what you realize is that, okay, if somebody isn't going to do something, then they're not going to do something. And you know what? There's a spiritual answer to this. That when something doesn't work out, there's a spiritual significance behind it. Sometimes you're used in a way that you might not realize that you're used. Sometimes spirit can speak through someone to say something right at the moment for something to either happen or not happen. So there's that spiritual saying that, hey, that nothing happens without God knowing about it, that everything happens with kind of a spiritual hand in it. So if you kind of remind yourself of that, then when you do that, it makes it easier not to get so caught up. And I got to admit, I was disappointed. I had there was a furniture piece that I had given her, that one neighbor, and some other things just to help her out, just because I thought she could use them. And it was just kind of understanding that some people might or might not be grateful for what you give, and that's fine. And I had that happen with another neighbor too. I gave her a bunch of furniture, and the thank you was not really there. It's not that the person wasn't thankful, or there can be disappointment, or you hook somebody up, as I mentioned before, and they're not super thankful in terms of like a major connection that can build their career. I often wonder why that is, or if you serve as a reference and somebody doesn't thank you. And the one thing I will tell you is, if you have expectations of how people ought to be, or what you should or shouldn't do in a situation, then what you're doing is you're becoming more reactionary. It's nice to have people be how you might want them to be, except they're just the way they are. They're the way that they are. And some people will tell you, well, when you behave in a particular way, they'll say something like, it restores my faith in humanity. It's kind of interesting, but that's like saying that the way that the other person is being is not the way they should be, right? And so I think when in handling life's disappointments, understand that people are just going to have different ways of being in situations, and you can get caught up with it. I think that the one thing I found, two things actually, that I found really help are empathy, because this is the central core in all anger management books, that the idea of empathizing and trying to see what somebody is doing or why they're doing what they're doing. And you won't always get it, because many people don't even know why they're motivated towards something. A lot of stuff is unconscious and subconscious, 90% of it. Freud didn't even differentiate between the two. So I think when you take a step back and realize, okay, so somebody's going to either be a particular way or not be a particular way in this situation. People are free to change their mind. People do not have to agree with you or to even tell you why they changed their mind. You might expect someone to be a particular way in a particular situation, but doesn't mean they will. So I think the next time something happens, just take a step back and say, I can express my feeling in this situation, but it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong in how the other person reacts or what they say. What do I want to do from here? What am I going to do? In some situations, you don't have any chance to do that. A person could be dead or moved away and you lost contact. So then you might want to do the letter writing exercise, where you kind of express, maybe your feelings about how you, grieve, whatever it is, and then kind of burn a letter, send it if it's safe. And you could also have a year-out letter, or a couple months out, or depending on how you want to be. I recommend at least 6 months to a year. I've done this. It's extremely helpful, and you can attach it to the back of your journal. And then you just kind of say, this is how, you wish them well, and then you kind of work on how your life is going to be 1 year out. And you're kind of open to whatever the universe brings. And so when you do that, it becomes much easier to handle life's disappointments. One thing that I noticed too, and it was with my friendship too of the mayor of our city, our current mayor. And one thing that I talked to him about, we were having dinner one night, and he's just an amazing person. I volunteered for a year and a half. I did coaching on a speech for him too, and a year and a half on his executive board, the YPKC. It was really interesting. And one thing he told me, it's so important, it stuck with me, is he said that he has so much to think about in any given day that he doesn't have time to worry about any one thing. And this is a man that's incredible with balancing his workload. So I asked him questions about time management. I said, well, how do you do this? And he says, a lot of times I won't know exactly what I'm going to be doing, out, like 1 week out. He says, I might know a few days out, but he has these executive assistants that help him. But he has everything planned. He has his BlackBerry with him. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he doesn't have time to have disappointments. I mean, he has had disappointments, but it's not like he's being held down by the disappointments. And something I've learned is that the busier the person is, it depends. I mean, if your role is such that you have to manage and lead all sorts of people, you almost don't have time to express your disappointments in the way that somebody who doesn't have those levels of responsibility and roles and responsibilities in general, or duties, I should say. So it's kind of interesting because that tells me that if you're able to carry out your role and still have disappointments, you can handle them. Figure out what you learned from a situation, and then what do you not want to get into again, or again, that goes back to that idea of zero-based thinking. What would you learn from the disappointment if you can learn something? And then if you can't, you can always take some lesson and then kind of move on. And so I just realized that there is that idea also of matching energy. That idea that, and people are always matching energy at some situation. If something enters into your experience or you enter into their experience at some level, as Joe Vitale reminds us, that there is that you're matching energy. And it's kind of funny because I actually met him in Asheville. I bumped into him and he was in a restaurant and I saw him. I said, "Oh my goodness, you're Joe Vitale." And it was kind of funny. We chatted just briefly. That was quite a few years ago, but it was amazing 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And he basically mentioned that, in his videos, his audiobooks, he mentions that you attract everything. And so at some level, the disappointment is teaching you something, isn't it? That the disappointment that you have in your life, maybe you got laid off. Something went so well. I had a student, she had a situation where she had a position but then was laid off, and that could teach you, everybody has these situations, right? Whether you know them in an academic sense, social sense, or whatever. And what it is that layoff could be the perfect thing because it helps you to rebuild. And what do I want to do now? You can't beat yourself up because something happened in a particular way, but what can you learn from it? What could you have done to make yourself more employable if something was you're doing tied into whatever skills you could learn or didn't have? I mean, there could be something, you could be fine in your position, but if you're not growing, remember, then there was a saying, Les Brown says, if you're not growing, you're dying. And the thing is, in your industry, they say every 5 to 7 years, and Brian Tracy talks about this too, it's changing, everything's changing. And you know what? You could be doing the same position with certain qualifications. Next year it's not, now you need this other qualification. And if you don't have it, somebody else does, they're going to get the more desirable options tied into your position. That could lead to layoffs or could lead to whatever. So it's this idea of accepting that life is going to have challenges across the board. Yet there's so much good and so much beneficence out there, 99.9%, it's all in your perception anyway, that if you understand that the universe is conspiring for you, as you often heard said, then you kind of realize that, okay, the disappointment may just teach me that I need to shift gears, or what am I learning from this? And if you really think about it, somebody's benefiting even when you feel that there's disappointment. And the one thing I want to go back to and tell you about with that neighbor is that I wished her really well. I said, congratulations on your purchase. I hope that it goes through because they're waiting on it, And I said that I'm very happy for you. If it's what you want, you got to be happy for the other person, And if somebody gets laid off, right? We have all had situations, something happened at work, or you've had a job in the past. That company at least let you build up experience. And maybe they didn't want to lay off, but they had some financial difficulties, right? So that you can be grateful for the time that you did have, and it can lead you to another place. So I think finding the gift, W. Clement Stone says this, Earl Nightingale, all these people say that finding the gift, or looking at the lesson, or the silver lining, as people often say. And I think training your mind, and that even goes back to the other clips that I have on gratitude, and a lot of people already have talked about this. Many good books by Dr. Robert Emmons. That idea of the gratitude exercise, cultivating your mind almost like a Jedi Master, 21 to 30 days, and just constantly being grateful and noticing opportunities to be grateful and thankful. It doesn't minimize any disappointments. It's just your focus is becoming more on what's right. And you understand there are going to be some disappointments along the way. Then if you understand that they're part of the journey and they can help you to learn, then it's not okay, that's what it is. I can feel what I want to feel. And then that feeling can become less, because then you realize, oh, there's a larger role that it plays, in terms of teaching me a lesson or putting me on the path that maybe I do want to consider. So I think these are things to think about with handling minor or even major disappointments in your life. And, getting the help that you need, whether it's biochemical, social, psychological, any group orientation can help. A lot of times it helps to have somebody who's gone through something similar that can kind of help or provide support, and journaling can definitely help with that. But I want to thank you very much for listening, and I really appreciate that. So handling life's disappointments, whether minor or major even, can really be something that's an ongoing process. All right, take care.